Hello and welcome to another Saturday radiology session by Team RadioGyan. My name is Dr. Amar Dare, and today's session is going to be a special session. Just like we've done these before, and the title suggests, in these sessions, what we do is we have conversations with eminent radiologists that go beyond the dark room. Today's speaker, again, is a very special speaker, Dr. Puneet Bhargava from the University of Washington, Seattle. And he's going to talk about on success, motivation, and the importance of collaboration. Dr. Bhargava is professor of radiology at the University of Washington in Seattle. He's the editor-in-chief of Current Problems in Diagnostic Radiology. He focuses on data analytics, organization psychology, and leadership. Clinically, he's an expert gastrointestinal and hepatobiliary radiologist. Dr. Bhargava enjoys writing, teaching, and collaborating, mentoring in all aspects of the publication process. Apart from all these things that he does, the one thing that has got me interested is his recent venture with YouTube. He puts out videos on productivity, how to improve yourself, leadership, and those are gems. So I would recommend everybody who's watching this to check out his videos later. Without any further ado, I would request Dr. Bhargava to start sharing his presentation. Over to you, Dr. Bhargava.
Thank you, and good evening to all of you guys. I'm very happy to be here, very excited, and I'm going to talk about some of the topics that are very close to my heart. When we talk about success, motivation, and collaboration, there's a lot that we do in radiology, but ultimately, my observation has been that most of our success is actually driven by how we're able to motivate people around us, how we can collaborate better. And I'm also going to talk about how over the years I have started to think about success a little bit differently. So my goals for the next hour or so that I'm going to spend with you, and thank you, Amar, for bringing interest into this topic, is we're going to talk about value-driven success, what that means. I'll show you. This talk will be littered with some of my favorite books that I'm going to recommend, but I'm going to hit the highlights of those books, and we're going to talk about the psychology of motivation and collaboration. And ultimately, the goal of all of this learning is to hopefully find more joy in our radiology careers. So like all of you guys, I started off with a small dream. I was a resident in India, and I had this vivid or silly dream at the time that I wanted to give this presentation at RSNA, where as a resident I never had a chance to go to, and I wanted to meet some of the people whose books I read, and that was my dream, and I tried to make it into a vision, a vivid vision, and then started out on my journey. And the other thing that I would like to tell you is that no matter at what stage you're at, try to reinvent yourself. Try to think about how you can do whatever it is that you're doing, whatever it is that you're passionate about, at a much higher level and maximize the impact you can have. And that was the reason where I started this YouTube channel where I talk about non-interpretive skills. So skills that you need to succeed as a radiologist, but are not thought of in the real sense as true radiology things. And this background banner image is actually sort of the closest I can get to that vivid image that I had when I had that dream as a radiology resident. And I feel very blessed that I'm able to teach in various forums and fulfill my desires. Now, let's talk about success for a second, right? Everybody wants to be successful. There's nothing wrong in trying to be successful. But let's talk about the traditional model of success. So I think you can actually demystify your process. So let's say you're really passionate about something that you want to do. Maybe it's a certain job, maybe it's a certain role. You can actually work backwards. So what you can do is you can find those people who do those kind of jobs, or do the kind of work, whether it's the position or whatever it is that you want to do, and ask them what their interview was like, what questions they were asked, and start about creating stories that you would share when you would be answering that question. So with that, I am a huge believer of this idea by Austin Kleon, show your work. So the idea here is that, if you look at the map of United States of America, Seattle is actually in the northwest corner of the country. So if I'm doing something good in the northwest corner of America, I don't think people know about it, maybe other than the people in my immediate vicinity. And so if I put myself and my work out there in the open domain on the internet, the connections that I allow to happen are will just blow your mind. And I think this is the idea that I think the radiologists of the current generation need to embrace. So to put our work out in an open access format so that everybody can access our work, and then there will be amazing opportunities that kind of flow from that. So you've got to, whatever work it is that you do that you want to be successful towards, you got to put it in the open domain. Then the next thing I want to say is that everybody needs to write. Now, writing may not come naturally to you, but I think people get more fulfilling careers if they start writing. So find a group of collaborators and start writing. Start writing about whatever it is that you might be doing. Now, small papers are great, but you want to do something really meaningful and big, so that'll get noticed. And this was one such paper that did it for me, and this took about 3 years to pull off. Now, if you're trying to be successful in the traditional sense, and you want to be a chairman of your department, now those roles are actually financial roles to a large degree. So people want to see if you've done a project in that space where have you made imaging more efficient? Have you tried to make your hospital save more money? So whatever it is that you've done in the finance space, and I would say publish it so that there's no argument that you actually did the work. Once you've done that, this is your traditional model of success, right? You kind of go through the ranks. It's very algorithmic. It's tier based. In many countries, it's age based, and I don't really like that. I think it should be aptitude based. But this is your traditional model of success. You probably figured out by now that this is not the model that excites me. So I'm going to reframe success for you in a different way that has brought me joy, and tell some stories, and hopefully you'll connect with some of them. And I don't think you can truly find success and happiness until you get to know yourself better. Now, how do we do that? So I think we have to do that by finding what our value system is. Now, everybody has values. Some of my biggest values are fairness and equity. So when I don't see fairness and equity in whatever I participate in, I get really upset. I get angry sometimes. And so if I'm working towards something where there is no fairness and equity, probably that's not a good fit for me. And everybody has different values, but I encourage you to explore those. And then ask your friends and family what were the things that made you the happiest. And they would very easily tell you those things. Like, for example, my wife told me recently that whenever I teach in a conference, or do grand rounds, or do something on YouTube, She says she has noticed that that makes me very happy. So I need to do more of those things, because when I'm happy and I'm passionate, it rubs off on other people. And so I encourage you to explore what makes you happy. Now, there are some simple questions that I would ask if you're kind of in that journey. Those those questions would be, based on the value system that you have, try to align your job so that they're more congruent. So if somebody gives you a promotion, is it in alignment with your values? Because if it's not, it might, after the initial honeymoon period is over, it might bring more distress. And then if you are really about service and making the world a better place, maybe you should consider starting your own business venture, because that is something that you can control. And then as the time goes by, maybe find this hybrid path of maybe doing 60 to 80% of radiology in the traditional sense, but also carving out some time to do innovative things that bring you joy and hopefully success. So basically, it's this alignment between your skills and interests and your values, that when these things are in alignment, and trust me, it can take many years sometimes to get this alignment, is that when you'll truly be on your success path. Now, if you notice about the conversations in the workplace, and try to give those conversations like one word between why, how, and what, you'll notice that the vast majority of our time is spent on what it is that we're going to do. How are we going to do this? What is our protocol? When are we going to do this? What scanner? All of this. But we hardly spend any time talking about why. And this book is Simon Sinek's less famous book, Find Your Why, and it gives a 4-hour process of defining your why. So I went through this exercise and I said, I need to define my why for my radiology career, because if I don't know what drives me, then I'm on this directionless journey. So I came up with this small statement to leave radiology better than I found it. So I set a goal for myself that if I spend 30, 35 years in radiology, and radiology is not one iota better because of me when I finish my career, that would be a very depressing thought. So any opportunity that I get to make radiology better, to make my colleagues better, that drives me, that I'm passionate about those things. So I find time to do those things. So I encourage you to find your mission statement and design it. And as your thoughts change, you can refine it. But have a why, very important. And then as time has gone by, I'm sort of mid-career. I find that when you're starting out, you need the money to basically fund your life. But as you build some savings and you've spent a few years in radiology, I encourage everyone to have this mindset that what would your life be if the paycheck didn't matter? And that just doesn't include your home life. It should also include your work life. So how do we do that? I think that idea leads to it's called job crafting. So basically, you're crafting your job slowly over time so that you're maximizing the time that you spend in things that bring you joy, and kind of aligning all your values and happiness and success. They're all working together. So how do you do that? So I think there's this whole FIRE community out there. They're all about working hard, saving. Some are even entrepreneurs, and some have goal of retiring early, and my goal is sort of recreational employment, which means that whenever I'm practicing radiology, I'm doing it for the fun of it, because when I'm having fun and I'm passionate about the work that I'm doing, I know it'll be fun for people who come in touch with me, either in my immediate vicinity or remotely, like we're doing right now, because I'm having fun. And so when you're having fun, it rubs up on people around you. So we all get fixated about, how much money it is that you're making and what's your salary like, who makes more, can I take more shifts? But this whole idea is bogus, because if you're making a lot of money and you're spending a lot of money, your cash flow situation is really, really bad. So I think I went back and looked at my own cash flow situation, and this is what I encourage everybody to do. Think about, how much money is left at the end of the month, and learn how to invest that money and get the paycheck out of the equation. Because once you start to do that, I think there's a huge amount of burnout in radiology. I don't have to educate anyone who practices radiology about how bad this is. But once you start to get money out of the equation, you can start to do more job crafting. You can negotiate at work to maybe get out of these some less desirable shifts, and you can have more time for your family, but also get to travel and see the world. The world is an amazing place, and also spend some time on your hobbies. Now, I encourage all radiologists to have hobbies, because um, whatever hobby you pursue, there's always a way to connect it back to radiology. Now, if you're a photographer, you can always connect, hobbies and make better images. If you're interested in videography like I am, you can always use it for teaching. So there's so many ways that your hobbies can actually make you a better radiologist, even in the traditional sense. Now, in this personal finance blogging space, this blog post just blew my mind completely. And this is from a blog called MrMoneyMustache.com. And this table actually shows how quickly you can get to this place where your paycheck is out of the equation. And on the left side are the savings. So if you save 60% of your money, you can actually hit all your financial independence numbers in just 12 and a half years. Now, I'm not saying 60 is the goal, but as you can see in the sliding scale, the lower you are on the scale, the more quickly you can get this out of your equation. And then the rest of the 2/3 of your career can just be completely fun, and basically you're just focusing on finding more joy. And so I recently did a grand rounds on this topic. This is more of a traditional educational teaching session on how to find your financial freedom. It's kind of a summary from 10 plus finance books that I've read, and I'm really passionate about this topic. So I encourage you to explore this. This is the idea that has completely changed the course of my life. Now, if you are a radiologist or working in the medical industry, and this is going to be on YouTube, or working in many other industries, that the revenue we make is based on your productivity and efficiency, you can't really get away from building some efficiency skills. So if you're starting out, this is I encourage you to explore this idea of getting things done. And I've made a 6-minute something video on getting things done, which I encourage you to watch. It is a very algorithmic process. It's a very simple process. And once you learn it, and once you actually start operating with that GTD model, you realize that there's a few magical things in here. Like, I'll give you an example. So for example, you have a task on your plate that is a less than 2-minute task. Now, if you put it on your calendar, it probably takes you the same amount of time to put it on your calendar. So you're much better doing it immediately. And this becomes the 2-minute rule. So once you know this, and once you start practicing it, every time you are faced with a less than 2-minute item to do, your brain just tells you, just do it. Just don't think about it. Don't overthink it. Just don't put it on your calendar. Just do it now. So I'm always doing these less than 2-minute tasks to keep my calendar light. And then there's a whole extra algorithm to it. It's pretty easy to understand and follow. So start with getting things done. But the goal is that if you're not operating in an efficient manner, you don't really have developed a method. And your method doesn't have to be the GTD method. All I'm saying is GTD is a good approach to start with, and then you kind of shape what your method will be going forward. But if you haven't started your productivity journey, a lot of your time is going toward doing easy things that are not really improving the quality of your life. But once you can figure out that all the things that you're supposed to do in your life and you do them efficiently, it actually opens up more time. So you can do some experimentation, you can fail, but hopefully with repeated failures getting better, right? Moving towards mastery. So productivity is a separate skill set, but your journey to creativity will actually start with a productive journey. Now, there are some people who are very creative and they're not at all productive, but most people who are working in a creative space have figured out some efficiency tips on how to get to this creative space. So this video is all about psychology of creativity and how to start from a productive mindset, but actually end up where most of your time is spent up in a creative space. Now, thinking of our careers, the initial part where I was explaining how people think the traditional model is a ladder-based model, right? To go to the higher rungs, you have to climb the lower rungs. There's no way to get to the top unless you've been through the bottom. And this is the traditional model. This is the lattice model. This lattice model means that you can go from wherever you are to wherever you want to be and just bypassing all those steps in the middle. Life's too short. You can't be spending years and years on some antiquated model. And once you go from one place to another, it doesn't mean you can't come back. You can keep exploring these multiple spaces over the course of your career and kind of reinventing yourself and doing an X percentage of maybe being a researcher and spending more time in an administrator. And maybe when you're older, you don't want to do administration, you come back and find more joy in being a full-time clinician, and all that's great. And that is what careers are truly about. So the other thing that I want to encourage everyone is to think about what kind of conversations you're having in the workplace about your own career advancement. So for example, if you're hearing things like, oh, you need to do more work in this space, and once you've created a body of work in this space, we will think about advancing you. That is a very old school way of thinking. What you should be hearing from your mentors, from your advisors, from your bosses is that we believe in you. We believe in your aptitude. We believe in the skills that you bring to the table. So we are going to empower you to do these amazing things even before you've done this body of work, because we know that you will be successful and we will give you all the tools that you need for success. That is a very different conversation. So you need to find those people who are willing to invest in you and be very perceptive to what kind of conversations are coming your way. Now, all of us do radiology for a living, and sometimes your job may not be as fulfilling, and that's okay. There's very few people who finish their careers in the same jobs that they start. So, which brings me to this idea of informational interviewing. Informational interviewing is not actually physically interviewing at a new place. It's actually when you see these people in conferences, just reach out to them and say, I'm interested to learn about your workplace. I'm interested to learn about how you do things. I've heard about you to this person. Can we talk about 20 minutes about how you guys do things in your workplace? And you're just collecting information so that when you're truly at a point where you maybe want to move, then you know which departments would be a great fit and aligned to your values. Now, I really encourage radiologists to explore side hustles. Now, opportunities may come your way. Maybe a company will reach out to you to say, hey, can you help design a certain MRI sequence? If you're an interventional radiologist, they may come to you about creating a new device. Could be anything. And think about how you can monetize that. And because then once you start to think as an entrepreneur, you can also the skills and the learning that you learn from your side hustle, you'll be able to bring it back to your job, and it overall becomes way more fun. And if you're not on social media, especially on Twitter, there is a really vibrant radiology community on Twitter. That's how many of us have connected. I connect with Amar all the time on Twitter. And I've made so many friends around the world just through Twitter. So get there. A lot of interesting ideas and work is being shared there. Takes few minutes in your day. You don't have to start posting if you're not uncomfortable with it. Just start slow and build it up. It's pretty fun. So I'm encouraging you to have big, hairy, audacious goals. So big that if you were to tell those goals to people who don't really know you, that they would burst out laughing. That's how laughable your goals should be. That means they're big enough and you're pushing your limits. So just try to go to wherever you want to be and start wherever you are. It just doesn't matter. Now, I recently read this book called Effortless, and we're taught that um, if you want to be successful, you've got to work extremely hard, and that translates to success. It is true in many instances, but it doesn't have to be. And this book is full of examples of how billion-dollar successes happened with actually less work. So for example, if you buy on Amazon.com, there is a one-click buy button, and before things could be bought on the internet, most people had to fill out a 4-page form, and then you could purchase something. And then Amazon came up with this idea, like, this is all crap. Like, why can't we just have a button? And they patented that button, and they had a monopoly over that button for many, many years. And they made several $billion from just simplifying a process. So when you try to fix things, don't think complicated, think simple. And which brings us to this idea of motivation. I got interested in motivation because I noticed that if you can motivate people around you, you get more out of them. If your group is motivated, it's a happy group, and motivation is all around us. So we need to know some basics of staying motivated ourselves, but also motivating our colleagues. So how do we do that? So there's really 3 words around this. So autonomy, mastery, and purpose. Let me explain them a little bit more. So most people want autonomy, right? They want the freedom to do whatever it is that they want to do whenever they want to do it. They want freedom to choose what they want to do, and it would be amazing if we could just choose who we want to do our things with. So that's autonomy. That's very motivating. Mastery is giving people the tools so that they can be successful. And Goldilocks tasks are the tasks that are just slightly outside your comfort zone. So you have to push your limits to get a little bit better every time you do anything. And both of these things stimulate mastery. And purpose is not just money. Making more money is a bad purpose, but find something larger than yourself. At a very high level, maybe improving the quality of healthcare, maybe improving outcomes. That's a very laudable purpose. And then there are extrinsic factors. So these autonomy, mastery, and purpose are sort of in the category of intrinsic factors. These are innate to an individual. And extrinsic factors are, your salary, your bonuses, and maybe some punishment, like losing some of your bonus if you didn't meet your benchmarks. And so if there was ever a boxing match like this one between Muhammad Ali and Joe Frazier, intrinsic versus extrinsic factors, intrinsic factors would win by a knockout. That's how important they are. So focus on the intrinsic factors. And if you're not having pay equity at work, which is the big thing these days, and there's a whole other issue of women radiologists being paid lesser than their male counterparts. It is shocking that it still happens. And it leads to extreme demotivation. And so learn about the equity theory, and then take this learning from equity theory to your workplace and explain to your leaders how just saving a few $1,000s here and there actually is costing them several hundreds and thousands of dollars in lost motivation and productivity. Very important to learn about this. Now, as you interact with different people, your success is going to be guided by your emotional intelligence, and that is different than your IQ. IQ is, um, how smart you are in your practice of radiology. But if you're being perceived in a very bad way, if when you get stressed out, if you act out, if your relationships are not working really well, those are things to learn in the space of emotional intelligence, and that's time that is very well spent. Now, most of what you do that will make you successful is this idea of change management. Now, change management is a science unto itself. I started reading about that several years ago, and this is kind of my notes on how change management should be done in radiology. This is a good starting point. It's not a thing that is kind of set in stone, but it gives you a parameter about how to think about impacting change in your organization and also in any outside of your work pursuits. Now, charisma is not something that we think about intuitively. Like, most people are like, oh, some people have it and some people don't. And that's actually not true. If you read this book by Elizabeth Fox Cabani, she'll teach you that charisma is something that most people actually learn. So I'll give you a very quick story here. So President Clinton was walking on White House grounds, really immersed in his thoughts, and a person interrupted him and said, "President Clinton, um, thank you for your service." So President Clinton could have just raised his hand and said thank you and kept walking on, but instead what he did was fascinating. He turned towards that individual, gave a little bow at the waist, looked at that person in the eye and said, "It's an honor serving you," and then waited a second and then walked away. That person was stunned. If you look at politicians in elections, they're waving and pointing to people in the crowd. They don't know anybody in the crowd. This is all rehearsed. So they all go through charisma training, and everybody can learn it. And there's a few things that radiologists can easily learn. I got really passionate about it, so I wrote about it with a colleague. And even simple things like when you pick up the phone when somebody is asking you a question on your report, if you're typing and talking on the phone, that's really bad charisma. So you're much better off, leaving whatever it is that you're doing, talking to someone on the phone, answering the question, be in the moment with them, and the experience that they'll have with you will be very charismatic. So you can actually do a few small things in the reading room which will up your charisma game. Now, the world actually runs on give and take. And this is very important to understand because there's no free gifts out there, right? And Adam Grant made this idea really mainstream about give and take. And so how does this work in our lives? So there are three kinds of people: givers, takers, and matchers. Now, matchers is, we all know those pretty intuitive, but let's talk about takers for a second. Now, they're fixated on getting more than they can give. They want everything. They don't want to do the work. They want to take all the credit. They're very competitive, and they're very cautious. And they're cautious that somebody will take advantage of them. It's really interesting. And they're very cutthroat, very competitive. And there's always one in every group. I'm sure by this time you're thinking, well, I know someone who's actually a taker. So there are takers everywhere. They're not bad people, they're just wired differently. Now, who are givers? I couldn't think of anybody other than Gandhi who was a true giver. And so these people are other people focused. They will always go out of their way to help you, not expect anything in returns. They're not takers in any way, and they seek to enrich your lives, and they're always generous. Now, who are these people, right? So your colleagues who are trustworthy, who have a strong team spirit, are all givers. Now, you would think that these people who are only givers, they give all the time, do extremely well in life because they're amazing people, they have a great value system. Turns out that's not true. So the worst performers are actually givers, but the best performers are also givers. So how does that happen? So the way it happens is that there's two types of givers. One is the loser kind of giver, and one is the winner kind of giver. And so most of what we think about success is wrong. So takers actually succeed, and givers commonly fail. So let's look at this agreeability axis here. So takers at the bottom, givers at the top. If you're agreeable to do whatever you're being asked, that's on the right. Disagreeable is on the left. So if you're a taker and disagreeable, like not only are you, this is like the perfect definition of mean people, right? This is taker who's disagreeable. If you're a giver and you're always agreeable, you're naive. It's only a matter of time before you get burnt out. If you're a taker and you are pretending to be a giver, oh my God, that's a taker who's masquerading. You don't want to empower them with leadership positions. But the place where you want to be is you're a giver, but you're also disagreeable. So when you get asked to do ridiculous things, you will fight it and you will say no because it doesn't make any sense. So these are the kind of givers that actually succeed. You just don't want to empower the takers who are masquerading because you will then get exploited. But givers inspire the world. So stick close to the good kind of giver. And this leads me to this idea of the Pareto principle. So Pareto figured out that um, most of our results are driven by 20% of our effort. So when that happens, you realize that 80% of our time is wasted. So we have to figure out what that is and just mercilessly cut that out. And so with this idea, if there's any German speaking people here, they would understand this phrase, but less is better. So you want to actually make your life simpler as you go on and focus on few things, but do them at a very high level. And if you're pitched an idea or if you're given something, then you want to get really excited about that before you say yes. And if you're not getting excited about that pitch, probably you should say no, right? So this was when I started out my radiology career. This is how I thought of success, right? I'm going to do good work. Eventually other people will see that I'm successful. And when people tell me that, oh, you're amazing, you're successful, then I will be happy. What's wrong with this is that, happiness has been deferred, and that's a bad place to start. What I'm proposing is start with happy first. So, regardless of what's going on, if you're happy, I always believe that happy people do great work. And who cares about success? But guess what? Now success is running after you because you're focused on doing good work. And I think some of this burnout that we're seeing here and some of the unhappiness in radiology stems from the fact that many of us are trying to find joy from work. And I think I want to separate it out. Joy is not a great word to associate with work. You should try to find joy from family and find satisfaction from work, and don't mix the two. So there's this Japanese concept called ikigai because there's a lot of philosophy behind how to find your happiness and success and true calling. And it turns out that when you can actually find what you're good at, what's actually needed, what you're passionate about, and what you can actually get paid for, that tiny overlap is where you want to be. So uh, it's a hard place to get to, and that's why learning about some of these things is important, because the more work you put in, the closer you get to your ikigai. Some more book recommendations. The One Thing is a fantastic book. It changed about how I think about things. The 10x rule will inspire you to raise your goals to a much higher level than so your goal setting will be extreme goal setting. And then none of this actually matters if you're an unhappy person. Try to be happy. Start with happy. Spread joy, and then you'll have more fulfilling careers. So success is complicated, but success should be defined by you. And success should mean differently for everyone. Success was not meant to be judged by others and imposed on you. That's the wrong way to think about success. This idea of memento mori, it's a Stoic principle. All of us are going to die. We have limited time on the planet. So might as well do something meaningful and do something um, that becomes a legacy over time, right? I think this is a great way to think about your career. You know, as you get older, as you move towards retirement, um, generate lots of stories that you can tell your grandkids. Grandpa or grandma did this when they were a radiologist. We do this, and that's so much fun, and this brought us so much joy. That's a great place to start. And if you choose goals, you know, goals are very interesting. If you most of us don't control goals, so but they can cause a lot of anxiety and stress because you can't control the outcome. What you can control, however, is the process. So, for example, if you are trying to, let's say, publish a, well, if you write 2 hours every day, that's your process. Whether the paper gets published or not, that's not something you can control. So focus on the process, ignore the goals, have a goal, have a high goal, but don't get fixated on the goal. Double down on your process, right? And then this idea of amor fati, again, a Stoic idea. You shouldn't wish too much that the things shouldn't be the way they are. Rather, understand that things are the way they are, and then you can be happy even while you're trying to change the status quo, and that's okay, and that's okay. So I've given you lots of ideas to explore. You might want to explore some of these books. There's several videos online. There's a lot of content online by other people. Some of it is published in the radiology domain. Some of it is published in outside of radiology. But the most amazing thing is that once these ideas have been percolated in your brain, there's no way you can ignore them, and they will drive your success to a very large degree. And there's more that's going to come on my channel. I'm committed to producing some of this content as it percolates through life in medicine, and I want to work on stuff that actually brings more joy from physicians who are sometimes struggling with challenges in healthcare. So with that, I'll stop. I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you, Dr. Bhargav. That was a phenomenal session. Like, I have to watch this at least 5 times to absorb all the pearls that you shared. I think a lot of our viewers particularly liked the agreeability axis that you shared. That was a totally new concept, and that was really good. Thank you for those pearls. I have a few questions, and I'll just.
Yeah.
Dr. Amay Kulkarni, who's a very close friend of mine and one of our speakers of our team, he has a question on behalf of early career radiologists. He asks, how can we avoid FOMO, that's fear of missing out, in academia, income, and workplace?
Yeah, so remember, Amaya, you're not going to get everything, right? Every decision that you take is moving you towards something, but also moving you away from something. The very fact that you and I both became a radiologist means that we are never going to become a urologist, right? We can try as hard as we want. We're never going to be a urologist. So everything, so you can't have too much of fear of missing out. I think as time goes by in your life, in your career, you will find that some things will bring you more joy, and over time, the very same things will stop bringing you joy, and it's time to reinvent yourself. And once you get into this idea of financial independence and actually spend time understanding what is it that money actually means? There's no point in being the richest man in the graveyard, right? You can't take this money with you. Money means something. If this money is not bringing you joy and fulfillment, what's the point of it? I'd much rather have less money and have a fulfilling life than have a life that I really couldn't do the things that bring me joy, but I had a whole lot of money, right? So there's always FOMO, but you kind of have to keep reminding yourself, because it's normal psychology to want everything, and you can have everything. You can't have everything at once, and that's sort of my guiding principle.
Thank you. Uh, Amir has another question, and it's very relevant to early career radiologists and even, say, radiology residents. How do you avoid imposter syndrome?
So we all have imposter syndrome, okay? It's just at a different level. So when when I showed up at University of Washington, my first CT study that I read was a patient with pancreatic cancer with double duct sign, and I didn't know that the attending who I was reading out with was a guy called Pat Freeney, who actually described double duct sign. Now just let it percolate through, right? And we went through the case, and he heard me out, and then at the very end he said, "Do you know who described double duck sign?" I said, "I had no idea." And I said that would be like a silly question to ask, like somebody on their first day. And then he said, "Yeah, that was one of my older papers," and he walked away. He's very humble about it. And I had goosebumps, and I went into the library to check, like, who is he, and all of that. So I think it's important to have, just keep it in perspective. Everybody starts with that. Every time you do something new, you'll always feel like you don't belong there, right? So if you start writing about leadership, you're like, I'm not a leader. How can I write about leadership? But that's okay. You have to just get over it. If I make a video and I want to put it on YouTuber, I'm not a movie maker. I'm not a director. So I can have an imposter syndrome. Like, I'm a radiologist. I don't have any business of going on YouTube. That's for like professional, people who do video work. Yeah, there's always going to be imposter syndrome, but you have to, like, that's why, like, Austin Kleon's work is amazing. If you want to get over some of these mental barriers where you think like, my job, I'm doing the work anyway. I have to showcase my work in a way to maximize impact, and then over time, this imposter syndrome will die a slow death. I remember, like, the first time when I gave my first RSNA presentation, I was like, oh, I probably don't belong here. But I said, you know what? If this is the last RSNA talk I ever give, I will make sure that everybody in the crowd has an experience, and I can live with that. And so, we do have imposter syndrome from time. You have to have a method on how to deal with it.
Thank you. I have prepared a few questions, and if you have time, we can cover them. My first question, you mentioned to me that you're into productivity and you're always trying to find new apps to boost your productivity. So what would be your top 3 Mac apps? And I'm sure there'll be Windows, relevant Windows apps. So what are your top 3 Mac apps that you use?
So I would encourage people to look into this service called SetApp, SETAPP. It's for Mac. It's like a renting service for apps. Like, it's a subscription-based model, and what they do is, they have apps coming in and going out, but they have several good ones. But some of the really really good ones that I use is a service called Backblaze. It's actually a backup system, but it's so seamless that whatever I do on my computer is backed up on the cloud. So imagine, like, what it would do for your productivity if your Mac just died and you lost everything that's on it, right? So backup, really important. And then there's so many apps in the SetApp system. Like, for example, there's a thing called Alfred. I don't think it's a part of SetApp, but Alfred is like a search bar on steroids. And then there's also a thing called Text Expander that you can buy. Text expanders, like if you're doing anything repetitive, you can type those emails or anything that you do repetitively basically and give it like an acronym, which they call a snippet. So if I say, you know, so as an editor, like I'm inviting people to for articles all the time. So I have an email that I've typed up, and every time I see something worth inviting, I just say invite with a two E's at the end, and that's like my macro because you would never type in the word invite with two E's. And whenever you type that, wherever you are on your computer, that email comes up. And then all you have to do is type the person's name and the title, and off it goes. It saved me typing 1.5 million characters in the last couple of years. So, I mean, this stuff is, I mean, invest in your apps and invest in your systems so that you can do the mindless tasks quickly so you can spend more time in the creative space.
Excellent. Those are nice tips. I use a couple of them and I can vouch for them. Coming to more interesting questions. So what purchase of $100 or less has positively impacted your life in the past 6 months or recently?
Yeah, so this is like one of the things like I think is a hidden gem. There's a $100 or less box. They come in different sizes. They're called Stream Deck. Okay. Now these devices are used by streamers. So imagine if an online streamer is live and they have to do something. They can't look away from the screen and spend 10 minutes doing something, right? So they have to have a box that they can do whatever they want to do with the click of a button, right? And in a way that the audience doesn't even know that they clicked that button. So I took that idea and I said, can I take this box and reprogram it to do all the things that I want to do in my life? And I have been playing with that, and I have several things that I've programmed on a Stream Deck. So if I want to open a certain file, if I want to open a certain program, it's just sitting on my box. It's a button. So, and it's like it's got a tactile feeling. It's very satisfying that if I want to listen to music on my computer, I can just click the Spotify button and my desired music comes on. Like it's this little convenience, but yeah, look into Stream Deck and just reprogram it to your needs. It's fun.
Excellent. So this is like we have a lot of radiology residents who watch our channel. So what is one advice that you would give to a smart, driven radiology resident who's about to enter the real world?
I think the real world, you have to remember that there's your training and then there's the real world, right? So in terms of radiology itself, you're not going to know the answers to every case. There will always be a case where you wouldn't know what you're looking at. And it's very important to know what you don't know so that you can seek help. And there should be no ego involved in finding another colleague and saying, I don't know what this is. Can you help? And you should be showing all these hard cases around. Remember, it's always about the patient. It's not about us. And try to keep your ego aside when you're reading, especially with the hard cases. It's always about the patient. That's one. As far as life in radiology, but not pertaining to radiology itself, just know that your success is maybe like 10-20% is going to be driven by how smart of a radiologist you are. And the vast majority of your success will come from these soft skills, how you interact with people, how you can leverage most out of people, how you can contribute to their lives. And if you go out of your way to help someone, I promise you there will always be payback. It may not be immediate. You may not even know that this is payback for a good deed that you did. Don't worry about it. Just keep helping people as best you can. Go about your life. And who knows, you may get your dream job when you'll be hired by one of your former residents. Life is long. You don't know what happens because if you treat people badly, we're a very, very small community. If I want to find anything about any radiologist, pretty much around the globe at this point, it would take a few, DMs on Twitter, a phone call, and then you can find out what they're about. So it'll actually hurt you if you try to be, mean and not helpful. So, just be nice, be collaborative, help people around you. Um, you know, we don't have to fight about our territories. The pie can always be expanded. So that's what I would say.
This is gold, especially for early career radiologists. This is really helpful. Now, on similar lines, there's a lot of advice that's not relevant or is being carried on for a long time. So, what's one advice that you would suggest to stay away from?
So, I think you a lot of people who will judge you, right? They'll say, well, at this stage of your life, you should be doing this and this, and as you move towards mid-career, they might say, well, at this stage you should be the chief of this, or you should be the director of that. And as a young radiologist, they might be saying, oh, you should be making X amount of money, or you should not be doing this, and look, I do this. I don't think there is one size fit all formula. Each job, each department, each university will be good at a few things and will be bad at a few things. And you will always be unhappy if you always continue to focus on the bad things. So what I would say is find the things that are really, really working well and leverage that, and always focus on that, and always try to reinvent yourself. Like, don't think like just because now that you've learned radiology and you're highly trained, that knowledge base will carry you through the 35 years that you'll spend in radiology. That knowledge base will probably last you 3 to 5 years. So you have to constantly learn, constantly evolve, constantly maybe even rediscover yourself. You may start off as an abdominal imager, and I wouldn't be surprised if you ended your career as a breast imager. That can happen too. So I think this evolution and change, that's the only constant.
Mhm. Thank you. During your talk, you had such wonderful book recommendations. I leave a link to all those in the description sections for those who won't want to check out later. Among all those books, what's one book that you have gifted the most, and why?
Yeah, so there's two books that come to mind. I'm big into philosophy, so there's a very, very small book, probably that you can read probably in 2 hours or less. It's called "Obstacle is the Way" by Ryan Holiday. I love that book because it makes you think about how to navigate obstacles and how to deal with them, and this your approach to difficulties in life. The second book for like career and life success and happiness is called The One Thing. And then finally, there's a book called Presentation Zen, which is amazing because it's like a coffee table book. You can read it in like an hour or less, and that will change how you do PowerPoint forever. And your presentations will have an impact that you didn't even realize. And you can make presentations with just images, hardly any words. So my presentation was made with presentations and technique, and that is so valuable to learn about that technique.
Thank you. I'm sure we love that book because I was about to say your presentation, not only your content was good, but the way you presented, your slides were simple, but they covered so much. You complemented them with what we were talking rather than putting everything on the slide that often a lot of speakers do. So that's one book that definitely I'm going to check out. So thank you for that. If you have time, I have a couple more questions if you are okay with that.
Yeah. Yeah, of course. Keep going.
So, in your journey, who has been your best teacher? Was it a mentor? Was it your parents? Or was it failure?
So I think a little bit of everything. Your parents, are never perfect. Always remember, don't have grudges towards them. They do the best they can with what they have, right? So that's a good philosophy to have about your parents. So they try to do their best. with the awareness that they have, the time that they were living in, and you know, the things they could, they indeed had the best for you in mind. I think in terms of mentorship, I think the external mentors were fabulous. They gave me an external perspective. I always benefited from having a mentor who always called bullshit bullshit. So never minced any words. If something was crap, they called it out, and that gave me a great perspective. Some of the pearls that I learned that really impacted my career were actually, you know, when you go to a meeting and you're not in a session and you're hanging out outside, some of the things that the best things that I learned were in those hallway conversations. So when I go to a meeting and there's a hallway conversation that I could be part of versus going to a session, you'll always find me in that hallway conversation, because you learn amazing things there. And I think failure is a good teacher because it's humbling. We all fail, but I think we have to reword failure. There is no failure, there is only learning. And every single time that I have failed in my life or something bad has happened, and I always think like, okay, this has happened. What could possibly be good in this, right? It's so bad. What possibly good can come out of this? And you don't realize in the moment, but you know, 6 months, 2 years down the road, you're like, oh my God, that was the best thing to have happened to me. Because if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have done this or that, or I wouldn't have thought this. I would just be in my comfort zone. And I think you have to be very uncomfortable being in a comfort zone, because if you're in a comfort zone and you're not being challenged and there's no challenges, you're not upset or frustrated with anything, then you're probably not growing.
Excellent. On those lines, as you see social media and everywhere, like everybody talks about their successes. That's what everybody puts out there. I would like to know, what was your favorite failure, and what lesson did you learn from that, or how it impacted your life, say 10 years down the line or 6 months down the line, as you mentioned?
Yeah, so I started out at University of Washington as a faculty member with zero publications on my CV, like literally zero, not even a case report. And so I was really behind, and I had, you know, um, I felt like it's only a matter of time before they find out how full of crap I am, and I'll be fired. And I had no idea how to write, and I started writing, and in the first maybe 2 or 3 years, I had 17 rejections. 17. Um, I think that's more rejections than people have projects in the first 2 or 3 years, right? And I knew that English wasn't a problem. I knew that there was something that I wasn't doing right. But in my head, I wasn't seeing them as rejections. I was like, okay, this journal doesn't want this, so I have to just send it to another journal. I never for once doubted that my stuff was crap, and it probably was because it was getting rejected. But I was able to learn from other people and fix those things, and over time, like everything got accepted. And a couple of years down the road, you know, I had an opportunity to become an editor of a journal. And like imagine like somebody starting out as in a faculty job with zero papers, being an editor of a journal, and having started their career with 17 rejections in the first 2 or 3 years. uh, I think that's a classic example of a failure leading to success, because I had to come to terms that, okay, my writing is not adequate. I've got to fix it. So I put in a lot of effort in learning the process. And once I learned the process, you know, you literally become unstoppable because you've learned the ropes. Now it's just a matter of walking on it.
That's an excellent example. So from 17 rejections at the start of your career, now not only you're an editor-in-chief for a prominent radiology journal, but you're such a prolific writer, and we see your papers in top radiology journals. So that's an amazing example. One last question, as you mentioned that you're constantly trying to improve. So what's one habit in the last few years or behavior that has most improved your life?
Yeah, I try to focus on happiness. I don't think success is hackable. I think these apps and hacks are great to do, um, you know, the things that are not really creative, but they need to be done. Like for example, like we need to do our taxes. You know, we need to read our films. There are lots of things in life that you can't run away from, and I think these productivity hacks and efficiency tips are good to do those things. I think creativity, this creative process is a journey that is full of failure. It's a slow process. It's an iterative process. But I try to be happy with wherever I am. But I also always remain like in an uncomfortable zone where I'm always learning. And you can actually learn from anyone. Don't think like you need somebody senior or older to teach you. I think millennials can teach you so much about how they approach life and how they're demanding for, what they think is right, and how forthright they are about their opinions. So I don't think we have to think about um, that I can only learn from older, more experienced people. I think one should always have like a leadership circle around them, which includes people of all ages and experience, and maybe some people even outside of radiology. And then it should be a safe space where you can talk about your challenges and support each other. I think happiness is really important, and um, I think physical fitness. Growing up, like I never prioritized physical fitness, and so I've made it a point for my kids that they're always a part of a sporting team. And my wife and I, we are starting to prioritize exercise, because that time and just exercise, just the physical fitness has benefits to all aspects of your life, and it's time very well spent and increases longevity too.
Thank you, Dr. Bhargav, for patiently answering all our questions and taking this session on a Saturday morning. I assume it was 6:30 in the morning when we started. So thank you for taking time on a weekend and sharing those pearls of wisdom from all your years of experience.
Yeah, and thank you so much, Amar, for the opportunity. I think I'm very impressed with the community, this online educational community that you and your colleagues in RadioGyan have built. I hope we'll collaborate some more going forward, but I encourage everyone to keep learning, keep growing, keep engaging, and I hope our lives intersect, that I get to meet you and some of the viewers when COVID is behind us and we start going to meetings. But yeah, feel free to reach out to me either through email or Twitter or YouTube, whatever it is that you like, and I will find the time to respond. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Dr. Bhargav, once again. And once you're done watching this video, make sure you check Dr. Bhargav's channel, where he talks about productivity, life hacks, and being more successful. So more of similar content what we did. Thank you, everybody who joined us live today. And thank you if you're watching this later on YouTube. I'll leave a link to all the books and relevant talks that Dr. Bhargav discussed in the description section, so you can check them out. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe to the to our channel. We do these videos every Saturday at 8 p.m. India time and 9:30/10:30 Eastern time, depending on daylight savings. Do like this video, comment if you have any suggestions, let us know in the comments, and do share it with your colleague, because as Dr. Bhargav mentioned, there's more to the pie. The more you share, the more you learn. Thank you, everyone, and I shall see you guys in the next video. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.